They say some people are born cursed. Sylra Vance was born lethal. In a world where touch meant connection, hierarchy, survival, her skin was poison. One drop of her blood could kill an alpha in seconds. The pack didn't exile her out of cruelty. They exiled her because they were afraid. But fear has a way of turning on itself. Tonight, under a blood-red moon, the girl no one could touch would walk into the Alpha King's fortress, not as a bride, not as a servant, but as a sacrifice meant to die screaming. What they didn't know was this. Sylra Vance had stopped begging for mercy a long time ago, and she was about to make the most dangerous man alive regret ever hearing her name. Stay until the end to see how a cursed Omega destroys a king's monster and becomes something far worse. Drop a comment with your city and hit that like button if you're ready for a story that doesn't play by the rules. The first time Sylra Vance bled, she was 6 years old, and she killed a boy. It wasn't on purpose. Nothing about Sylra was ever on purpose. At least, not in the beginning. She'd been playing near the creek with the other children, barefoot in the mud, laughing at something stupid one of the older kids had said. Then Mikhail, big, loud, always shoving, pushed her too hard. She went down on the rocks, scraped her palm open, and cried. Mikhail, being Mikhail, had grabbed her wrist to pull her up. He was dead in 11 seconds. She remembered the way his eyes went wide, the way his fingers locked around her arm like iron, then started to shake. His mouth opened. No sound came out, just a wet, choking gasp. His veins turned black under his skin, crawling up his arm like roots, spreading fast. By the time the adults came running, he was convulsing in the dirt, foam spilling from his lips, his body arching backward in a way bodies shouldn't bend. They pulled him away from her. Too late. Sylra sat there in the mud, her bloody palm still open, watching them try to save him, watching them fail. No one touched her after that. What? The pack healer was a woman named Orette, old and sharp-eyed, who smelled like burnt sage and had hands that never stopped shaking. She was the one who finally dared to examine Sylra, but only after wrapping the child's hands in cloth soaked in some foul-smelling oil. Her blood, Orette said, her voice flat and final, is wrong. The pack alpha, a man named Torvas with a scar splitting his lip, stood in the corner of the healer's hut with his arms crossed. Wrong how? Silver, Orette said. She held up a glass vial. Inside, Sylra's blood shimmered, metallic and unnatural, like liquid moonlight. Not red, not normal, it's poison, pure poison. Anyone who touches it, skin to skin, dies. Torvas stared at the vial, then at Sylra. She was small for 6, thin, dirty. Her hair was a tangled mess of dark brown, her eyes too big for her face. She didn't look dangerous. She looked like a kid who'd scraped her knee. She touched Mikhail, Torvas said slowly. She bled on him, Orette corrected. Direct contact, that's all it takes. Can you fix it? No. Torvas was quiet for a long time. Then he turned and walked out. Sylra didn't understand what that meant yet, but she would. They didn't kill her. That would have been kinder. Instead, they built her a shack at the edge of the territory, past the main settlement, past the farms, past the training grounds where the young alphas learned to fight. A place where no one had to see her. No one had to think about her. Her mother, a soft-spoken Omega named Lyra, was allowed to visit once a week. She brought food, clean clothes, and guilt so thick Sylra could taste it in the air. I'm sorry, Lyra whispered every time. I'm so sorry, baby. Sylra stopped answering after the first year. What was there to say? Her father never came. He was a beta, mid-rank, unremarkable. He'd wanted a son. He got a daughter who killed people by accident. Sylra heard later that he'd asked the alpha to let him take a second mate. Permission granted. She was 7 when she stopped waiting for him. The pack operated on a hierarchy as old as the species itself. Alphas at the top, betas in the middle, omegas at the bottom. It was brutal, simple, and unforgiving. Strength mattered, bloodline mattered, usefulness mattered. Sylra was none of those things. She was a stain, a mistake, a thing that existed only because killing children, even poisonous ones, was still taboo. But taboos don't last forever. By the time she was 12, there were whispers. Quiet ones at first, then louder. She's dangerous. What if she gets angry? What if she bleeds in the water supply? We should have dealt with this years ago. Sylra heard them. She heard everything. When you live alone at the edge of the world, sound carries. She also learned to read. Her mother, bless her, curse her, had smuggled books. Old ones, forbidden ones, the kind the pack kept locked away because knowledge was power, and Omegas weren't supposed to have power. Histories, medical texts, philosophies from this old world, before the packs, before the hierarchies solidified into law. Sylra devoured them. She learned that poison wasn't always a weapon. Sometimes it was medicine. Sometimes it was both. She learned that fear was a choice, and she learned that the people who called her a monster were the same ones who'd built a world where monsters thrived. When Sylra turned 16, her mother stopped coming. No explanation, no goodbye. Sylra waited by the door of her shack for 3 weeks before she accepted it. Lyra was done. Maybe the pack had forbidden it. Maybe Lyra had just given up. It didn't matter. Sylra buried the hurt somewhere deep and decided she was done waiting for the world to be kind. She started hunting, not animals. She couldn't risk contaminating meat. But she learned to trap, to forage, to survive on roots and berries and whatever she could scavenge without touching. She made gloves from rabbit hide, boots from bark and sinew. She covered herself head to toe, every inch of skin hidden. She became a ghost. The pack forgot about her, or pretended to, until the tribute came. The Alpha King's name was Kyle Draven, and he ruled the Northern Territories with a fist made of iron and terror. Every 5 years, he demanded tribute from the outer packs. Goods, resources, Omegas. It was the Omegas that people talked about in whispers. No one who went to Draven's fortress ever came back. When the summons arrived, a rider in black carrying a letter sealed in red wax, the entire pack gathered in the central square. Torvus read it aloud, his voice tight. The king requires 1 Omega, unmated, fertile, delivered within the month. Silence. Then the panic started. Families hid their daughters. Mated Omegas clung to their alphas. The pack's council met behind closed doors for 2 days straight. Sylra heard about it from a beta named Jory, who sometimes left food near her shack out of pity or guilt. She was never sure which. They're picking someone, Jory said, setting down a sack of dried meat. Lots are talking about drawing straws. Why not just send a volunteer? Sylra asked. Jory laughed, bitter. Would you volunteer to die? Sylra didn't answer, but she thought about it. 3 days later, Torvus came to her shack. He didn't come alone. He brought 2 alphas with him, both armed, both tense. Sylra stood in the doorway, gloved hands loose at her sides, and waited. Torvus looked older than she remembered, grayer, tired. You know why I'm here, he said. You're sending me to the king. Yes. Because I'm disposable. He flinched, just barely. Because you're unclaimed, and because no one will miss me, Sylra finished. Torvus didn't deny it. She should have been angry, should have screamed, fought, cursed them all. Instead, she smiled. It was a cold, sharp thing, and it made Torvus take a step back. When do I leave? She asked. They gave her a wagon, a driver, a trunk of clothes she didn't want. No ceremony, no farewell. The pack lined the road as the wagon rolled out, but they didn't wave. They just watched. Sylra sat in the back, her face covered by a hood, her hands wrapped in cloth. She didn't look back. Let them forget her. She wouldn't forget them. The journey north took 8 days. The driver was a beta named Karth, middle-aged and silent. He didn't try to talk to her, didn't ask questions, just drove. Sylra was fine with that. She spent the days watching the landscape change, forests giving way to rocky hills, hills giving way to barren plains. The air got colder. The sky got darker. On the 6th day, she saw the first bones. They lined the road like markers, massive, bleached white, half buried in the dirt, ribs the size of tree trunks, a skull the width of the wagon. What are those? She asked. Karth glanced at them, then back at the road. Old gods, he muttered, or demons. Depends who you ask. And the king? Karth's jaw tightened. The king's worse. Was. The fortress appeared on the 8th day, rising out of the wasteland like a scar on the earth. It was massive, black stone, jagged towers, walls so high Sylra had to crane her neck to see the top. No flags, no banners, just cold, empty stone. The gates opened without a sound. Inside, the courtyard was lined with soldiers, silent, armored, faces hidden behind helmets. They didn't move as the wagon rolled past. Sylra felt their eyes on her. The wagon stopped in front of a set of iron doors. Karth climbed down, then hesitated. "Good luck," he said quietly. Sylra didn't answer. The doors opened. A woman stepped out, tall, blonde, dressed in dark leathers. Her eyes were ice blue and sharp as knives. "You're the tribute," the woman said. Not a question. "Yes." "Name?" "Sylra Vance." The woman's expression didn't change. "Follow me." Sylra climbed down from the wagon and followed her inside. The doors slammed shut behind her. The woman's name was Mira. She was the king's second, his enforcer, his strategist, his right hand. She didn't waste words. "You'll be given a room," Mira said as they walked through a long, dimly lit corridor. "Food will be brought. You are not to leave your quarters without permission. You are not to speak to the guards. You are not to attempt escape." "And if I do?" Mira stopped walking, turned. "Then you die faster," she said flatly. Sylra met her gaze and didn't blink. Mira's mouth twitched. Almost a smile. Almost. "You're braver than the last one," she said. "Or stupider. We'll see." The room was small. Stone walls, a narrow bed, a single window too high to reach, a basin of water in the corner, a candle on a wooden table. Sylra sat on the bed and waited. An hour passed, then 2. Finally, the door opened. A girl stepped in, young, maybe 14, with messy red hair and freckles. She carried a tray of food, bread, cheese, some kind of stew. "Hi," the girl said, setting the tray down. "I'm Pip." Sylra stared at her. Pip grinned. "You're not very talkative, huh? That's okay. Most people here aren't. I talk enough for everybody." She plopped down on the floor, cross-legged. "So, you're the new tribute. That's rough. Last girl cried for 3 days straight. You don't seem like a crier." "I'm not." "Good. Crying's boring." Pip tilted her head. "You scared?" "Should I be?" Pip's grin faded. "Yeah," she said quietly. "You should." Pip came back the next day, and the day after that. She was chatty, nosy, and completely fearless in a way that made Sylra wonder if she was insane or just too young to know better. "Why are you here?" Sylra asked on the 3rd day. Pip shrugged. "Orphan. King took me in when I was 7. Needed someone to run messages, clean rooms, stuff like that. Could be worse." "Could it?" Pip looked at her seriously. "Yeah. I could be you." Sylra almost laughed. "Why doesn't anyone leave?" she asked. Pip's face went dark. "Because of him." "The king." "Yeah." Pip lowered her voice. "He's different, powerful, scary. But also," she hesitated, "cursed." Sylra leaned forward. "Cursed how?" Pip glanced at the door, then whispered, "He turns into a monster." That night, Sylra heard it for the first time. A roar, low, guttural, inhuman. It shook the walls, rattled the window, made her bones ache. She stood, pressed her ear to the door, screaming, running footsteps, the clang of metal, then silence. Pip appeared in the morning, pale and shaking. "You heard it," she said. Sylra nodded. "Full moon," Pip whispered. "He changes. Every full moon. And when he does..." She trailed off. "What?" Pip's voice was barely audible. "People die." Sylra met the king on her 7th day in the fortress. She was summoned to the throne room, a cavernous hall of black stone and flickering torches. At the far end, on a throne made of twisted metal, sat Kyle Draven. He was younger than she'd expected, maybe 30, Tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair that fell just past his jaw. His eyes were gray, cold, empty, like smoke over ice. He looked at her the way you'd look at a bug. "Sylra Vance," he said. His voice was deep, rough. "The poisonous Omega." She didn't flinch. "That's me." His mouth twitched. "You're not afraid." "Should I be?" He stood, walked toward her. Each step echoed. He stopped a few feet away, studying her. "You're different," he said. "So are you." His eyes narrowed. Sylra met his gaze. "I know what you are," she said quietly, "and I know what happens when the moon is full." For the first time, something flickered in his expression. Surprise, maybe anger. "And you're still not afraid?" Sylra smiled, cold, sharp. "Fear's boring," she said. Kale stared at her. Then he laughed. It was a low, dangerous sound, but it was real. "You'll do," he said. But that night, Sylra made a plan. She wasn't going to beg, wasn't going to run. She was going to survive. And if that meant facing a monster, fine. She'd been one her whole life. The next morning, Sylra woke to the sound of steel scraping stone. She sat up fast, pulse jumping, and found Mira standing in the doorway with a sword in her hand. "Get up," Mira said. "You're training." "Training for what?" "Survival." Sylra didn't move. "I thought I was here to die." Mira's expression didn't change. "You are, but the king wants to see if you'll fight first." She tossed the sword onto the bed. It landed with a dull thud. "Put this on and meet me in the courtyard. You have 5 minutes." She left before Sylra could respond. Sylra picked up the sword. It was heavier than she'd expected, the blade nicked and worn. Not a weapon for show. A weapon that had seen use. She dressed quickly. Leather pants, a rough tunic, boots that were a size too big. No gloves. Mira hadn't given her any. That was a problem. She wrapped her hands in strips of cloth torn from the bedsheet, winding them tight around her palms and fingers. It wasn't perfect, but it would have to do. When she stepped into the courtyard, the sun was barely up. The air was cold enough to sting. Mira was waiting, arms crossed, looking bored. "You're late," she said. "I had to wrap my hands." Mira's eyes flicked to the makeshift bandages. "Smart, but it won't help you." "Why not?" "Because I'm faster than you think." Mira drew her own sword in one smooth motion. "Now pick that up and try not to die in the first 30 seconds. Sylra barely got the sword raised before Mira was on her. The first strike came high. Sylra ducked, stumbled backward, nearly dropped the blade. The second came low, sweeping for her legs. She jumped, clumsy, off balance. Mira didn't slow down. She moved like water, like wind, like something that didn't have to think about where her body went. Every strike was precise, controlled, brutal. Sylra blocked one, missed two. Took a hit to the ribs that knocked the air out of her lungs. She hit the ground hard, gasping. Mira stood over her, sword pointed at her throat. "Dead," Mira said flatly. "Again." Sylra coughed, rolled onto her side. "I've never held a sword before." "I know. Then why?" "Because the king wants to see what you're made of." Mira stepped back, lowered her blade. "Get up. We're not done." They went again, and again, and again. By the time the sun cleared the walls, Sylra was bleeding from a split lip. Her ribs screamed with every breath, and her arms felt like dead weight. She didn't quit. Mira finally called a stop when Sylra collapsed face first into the dirt and didn't get back up. "Not bad," Mira said, sheathing her sword. "For someone with no training," Sylra groaned. "You've got instinct," Mira continued. "That's rare. Most people freeze up when someone swings at them. You moved." "I lost." "You lasted longer than the last tribute." Mira crouched down beside her. "That one begged me to stop after the first hit." Sylra turned her head, squinting up at her. "What happened to her?" Mira's face went cold. "Same thing that happens to all of them." She stood and walked away, leaving Sylra alone in the dirt. Pip found her an hour later, still lying in the courtyard. "You look terrible," Pip said cheerfully, hauling Sylra to her feet. "Thanks." "I brought food." Pip held up a cloth bundle. "And bandages. You're going to need both." They sat on the stone steps near the barracks. and Pip unwrapped bread, cheese, and a chunk of dried meat. Sylra ate slowly, every bite making her jaw ache. "Mira's the best fighter in the fortress," Pip said, tearing off a piece of bread. "No one beats her, not even the king." "Then why does he keep her around?" "Because she's loyal, and because she's the only one who can control him when he—" Pip trailed off, glancing around. "You know, changes." Sylra swallowed. "How does she control him?" Pip lowered her voice. "Chains, big ones, iron. They lock him in the lower levels when the moon's full. Mira oversees it, makes sure he doesn't break out. Has he ever broken out?" Pip's face went pale. "Once." "And?" 17 people died that night. Pip's voice was barely a whisper. He tore through the east wing like it was paper. Mira had to bring in every soldier in the fortress to drive him back into the cage. Sylra stared at her. "And they still serve him?" "What choice do they have?" Pip shrugged, but her hands were shaking. "He's the king. You don't just walk away from a king, especially not one like him." Bam. That afternoon, Sylra was summoned again. This time, not to the throne room, to the library. It was a massive space, shelves stretching 3 stories high, filled with books, scrolls, maps, things Sylra couldn't even name. Light filtered in through narrow windows, turning the dust in the air gold. Kael was sitting at a table in the center of the room, surrounded by open books. He didn't look up when she entered. "Sit," he said. Sylra hesitated, then pulled out a chair and sat across from him. Kael finally raised his eyes. He looked tired. Shadows under his eyes, hair disheveled like he hadn't slept in days. "You survived Mira," he said. "Barely." "Good. That means you're not entirely useless." He closed the book in front of him. "Tell me about your blood." Sylra blinked. "What?" "Your blood. The silver. How does it work?" She frowned. "I don't know. It just is." "That's not an answer." "It's the only one I have." Sylra leaned back in her chair. "No one's ever studied it. They just avoided me." Kael was quiet for a moment, then pushed one of the books toward her. "Read." Sylra looked down. The page was covered in dense text, diagrams of human anatomy, notes in the margins. "What is this?" she asked. "Research," Kael said. "Old texts, pre-pack, before the hierarchies, before everything became about dominance and submission." He tapped the page. "There are stories of people like you, rare, dangerous, called Silvara in the old tongue. It means moon-touched." Sylra's breath caught. "Moon-touched?" "Your blood reacts to alpha pheromones," Kael said. "That's why it's lethal. It recognizes dominance as a threat and defends itself violently." "That's insane." "Is it?" Kael leaned forward. "You've never bled on a beta or an omega, have you?" Sylra opened her mouth, closed it. She hadn't. Mikkel had been an alpha's son. The few other accidents over the years. Always alphas. Always. "How do you know this?" she asked quietly. Kael's jaw tightened. "Because I've been looking for someone like you for a very long time." He didn't explain further, just stood and walked to one of the shelves, pulling down another book. Sylra watched him, her mind racing. "Why?" she asked. "Why would you look for someone like me?" Kael didn't answer right away. He flipped through the book, stopped on a page, then set it in front of her. The illustration showed a man, half human, half beast. Twisted, monstrous. The text beneath it was in a language she didn't recognize. "What is this?" Sylra whispered. "Me," Kael said simply. She looked up sharply. Kael met her gaze, and for the first time she saw something other than coldness in his eyes. Fear. "I wasn't born cursed," he said. "I was made this way. A ritual. A punishment. It doesn't matter why." He closed the book. "What matters is that every full moon I lose control. I become something that kills everything in its path. And no one, nothing, has ever been able to stop it. Except chains." "Chains slow it down," Kael corrected. "They don't stop it. Eventually, I'll break them. Eventually, I'll kill everyone here. It's just a matter of time." Sylra's throat was dry. "And you think I can stop you?" "I think your blood might be the only thing that can." She should have said no, should have laughed in his face, called him insane, demanded to be sent back to her miserable little shack where at least she knew the rules. But she didn't, because for the first time in her life, someone was looking at her like she was more than a mistake, like she was a solution. "What do you want me to do?" she asked. Kale studied her for a long moment. Then he said, "The moon is full in 3 days. When I change, I want you in the room." "You want me to bleed on you?" "If it comes to that, you'll die." "Maybe." Kale's voice was flat. "But if it works, if your blood can counteract the curse, then I'll finally be free." Sylra stared at him. "And if it doesn't work?" "Then you die and I stay a monster." He shrugged. "Either way, the outcome is the same for you." Not exactly reassuring. "I'm not trying to reassure you." Kale leaned forward, his gray eyes locked on hers. "I'm giving you a choice. You can stay in your room, wait for the inevitable, and die like every other tribute. Or you can take a risk, do something no one's ever done, and maybe, just maybe, survive." Sylra's pulse was hammering. Her hands were shaking under the table. She thought about Mikael, about the black veins crawling up his arm, about the way the pack had looked at her, like she was death-walking. She thought about Kael's laugh, the way he'd said, "You'll do." 3 days, she said. 3 days. Pip thought she'd lost her mind. "You said yes?" Pip's voice was shrill. "Are you insane? Do you have any idea what he looks like when he changes?" "No," Sylra admitted. They were in her room, Pip pacing back and forth like a caged animal. "But I'm going to find out." "You're going to die." "I was going to die anyway." Pip stopped, spun around. "That's not the point." "Then what is?" Pip's face crumpled. "I don't want you to die," she said quietly. "You're the first person here who doesn't treat me like I'm invisible. And now you're going to walk into a room with a monster and—" Her voice broke. Sylra stood, crossed the room, and put a hand on Pip's shoulder. Pip flinched. "Don't." "I'm covered," Sylra said gently. "You're safe." Pip stared at her, eyes red. "How are you so calm?" "I'm not." Sylra's smile was crooked. "I'm terrified, but I'm also tired of being afraid." Dunked. The next 2 days passed in a blur. Mira trained her relentlessly, not with swords this time, but with movement, dodging, evasion, how to stay light on your feet when something bigger and faster was coming at you. "You're not going to fight him," Mira said. "You can't, so your only option is to not be where he swings." Sylra was covered in bruises by the end of the second day, but she was faster. Not fast enough, but faster. Kale didn't speak to her again. She saw him once, crossing the courtyard, his face unreadable. He looked like a man walking to his own execution. Maybe he was. The night before the full moon, Sylra couldn't sleep. She sat by the window, staring out at the wasteland beyond the walls. The bones were visible in the moonlight, pale and stark. Pip slipped into the room sometime after midnight. "Can't sleep either?" Sylra asked. Pip shook her head. She climbed onto the bed and sat cross-legged, hugging her knees. "Tell me something," Sylra said. "Why do you stay here?" Pip was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "Because he saved me." Sylra looked at her. "I was 7, Pip said. Living on the streets, starving. A pack of alphas found me. They were going to, you know." She swallowed. "Kael killed them. All of them. Then he brought me here, gave me food, a bed, a job." She looked at Sylra. "He's not a good man, but he's not all bad either." Sylra didn't know what to say to that. "I hope you survive," Pip whispered. "Me too." The full moon rose at dusk. Sylra was taken to the lower levels, down stone stairs that seemed to go on forever, into a part of the fortress that smelled like rust and rot. Mira led the way, torch in hand, her face grim. They stopped in front of a massive iron door. Chains crisscrossed it, padlocked in 3 places. "He's already inside," Mira said. "Once I open this, you have 30 seconds to get in. After that, I lock it behind you. And if I change my mind, then you don't go in." Mira's eyes were hard. "But if you do, there's no coming back out until dawn. Understand?" Sylra nodded. Mira unlocked the chains one by one. The sound echoed in the narrow corridor. "One more thing," Mira said. "If you survive this, I'll teach you how to actually use a sword." Sylra almost smiled. "Deal." Mira pulled the door open. Inside was darkness, and a low, guttural growl that made every hair on Sylra's body stand on end. She stepped through the door. It slammed shut behind her. The locks clicked into place. And then she heard it. Breathing. Heavy. Wet. Wrong. Sylra's hands were shaking. She unwrapped the cloth from her left palm, felt the sting of cold air on bare skin. "Kael?" she called out. The breathing stopped. Then, from the darkness, a voice. Barely human, barely recognizable. "Run!" She didn't. The thing that lunged at her wasn't a man anymore. It was massive, 8 feet tall, all muscle and claws and teeth. Its eyes glowed yellow in the dark, feral and mindless. Sylra threw herself to the side. Claws raked the air where she'd been standing. She hit the ground, rolled, scrambled to her feet. The beast turned, slow, deliberate. It was toying with her. "Kael," she said again, louder. "I know you're in there." The beast snarled, then it charged. Sylra ran, not away, but toward it. At the last second, she dropped low, slid under its legs, came up behind it. It spun faster than she'd expected. A clawed hand caught her across the shoulder, tore through fabric and skin. She screamed, blood welled up, silver and bright. The beast froze. Its nostrils flared. It stared at the blood on its claws. Then it lunged again. This time, Sylra didn't dodge. She grabbed its wrist with her bare, bleeding hand. The reaction was instant. The beast convulsed. Black veins spread from where her skin touched its, crawling up its arm like fire. It roared, agony, rage, confusion, and threw her across the room. Sylra hit the wall hard, vision blurring. The beast staggered, fell to one knee. Then it started to change, shrinking, twisting, bones snapping back into place. Sylra watched, breathless, as the monster became a man. Kyle collapsed onto the stone floor, gasping, naked, covered in sweat and blood. He looked up at her, eyes wide. "You did it?" he whispered. Then he passed out. Sylra slumped against the wall, her hands still bleeding, her whole body shaking. She'd done it. She'd stopped the monster, and she was still alive. Dawn came too slowly. Sylra sat with her back against the cold stone wall, watching Kyle breathe. He hadn't moved since he'd collapsed, just lay there on the floor, chest rising and falling in shallow, uneven rhythms. Her hand had stopped bleeding, but the wound was ugly, deep gouges across her palm where his claws had caught her. She'd wrapped it in what was left of her shirt sleeve, but silver still seeped through the fabric, staining it dark. Everything hurt. Her shoulder throbbed where he'd hit her. Her ribs ached. Her head felt like someone had taken a hammer to it. But she was alive. The door's lock scraped and clanged. Mira stepped through, torch raised, eyes scanning the room like she expected carnage. She found Sylra first, then Kyle. "He's human," Mira said. Not a question, a statement of disbelief. "He is now," Sylra said. Her voice came out hoarse. Mira crossed the room, crouched beside Kyle, pressed 2 fingers to his throat. Pulse is weak, but steady. She looked at Sylra. "What did you do?" "I bled on him." "And he didn't die?" "No." Sylra's laugh was brittle. "Apparently my blood doesn't kill monsters, just alphas." Mira's expression didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes. Respect, maybe, or fear. Hard to tell with her. "Can you walk?" Mira asked. "Probably." "Good. We need to move him before the fortress wakes up. If anyone sees him like this..." She didn't finish, didn't need to. Between the two of them, they got Kyle upright, barely. He was dead weight, head lolling, legs dragging. Mira took most of his bulk across her shoulders, grunting with the effort. "Where are we taking him?" Sylra asked. "His chambers. And we tell no one what happened here." Mira's voice was steel. "Understood?" Sylra nodded. They hauled him through the corridor, up the endless stairs, into the fortress proper. The hallways were empty, too early for the servants, too late for the night guards. Mira moved fast, her steps sure even with Kyle's weight dragging her down. When they reached his chambers, Mira kicked the door open and they dropped him onto the bed. He groaned, turned his head, but didn't wake. "Stay with him," Mira said. "I'll send Pip with supplies." "What do I tell him when he wakes up?" Mira paused at the door. "The truth, that you saved his life." She looked back at Sylra, her face unreadable. "And that you're more dangerous than anyone in this fortress realized." Then she was gone. But Kael woke 3 hours later. Sylra was sitting in a chair by the window, her wounded hand resting in her lap, when she heard him stir. His eyes opened slowly, unfocused. He stared at the ceiling for a long moment, then turned his head toward her. "You're still here," he said. His voice was rough, barely above a whisper. "Where else would I be?" He pushed himself up on his elbows, winced, and looked down at his body. No claws. No fur. Just skin. Scarred, bruised, but human. "It worked," he said. "It worked." Kyle swung his legs over the side of the bed, sat up fully. He was still naked, but he didn't seem to care. He looked at Sylra like he was seeing her for the first time. "Show me your hand," he said. She hesitated, then unwrapped the makeshift bandage. The wound was worse than she'd thought. 4 deep gashes running diagonally across her palm, the edges ragged. Silver blood had crusted around them, making the skin look almost metallic. Kale stared at it. "I did that." "You weren't you." "Doesn't matter." He stood, crossed the room, stopped in front of her. "I could have killed you." "But you didn't." "I tried." Sylra met his gaze. "And I stopped you." "That was the plan, wasn't it?" Kael's jaw tightened. He reached for her hand, then stopped himself, fingers hovering inches away. "Does it hurt?" "Yes." "Good." She blinked. "Good?" "Pain means you're alive." He turned away, walked to a cabinet, pulled out a shirt. "Most people who touch me don't live long enough to feel anything." Sylra watched him dress, her mind spinning. "What happens now?" Kael pulled the shirt over his head, then looked at her. "Now we see if it lasts." "If what lasts?" "The cure, if that's what it is." He crossed his arms. "The transformation is triggered by the moon. But the curse itself, the thing inside me, it's always there, always waiting. I felt it leave when your blood touched me, felt it die." He paused. "But I don't know if it's permanent." "How will you know?" "The next full moon is in 28 days. Kael's expression was grim. "If I change again, then it didn't work. If I don't?" He trailed off. "Then you're free." "Then I'm free." Yeah. Word spread fast. By midday, the entire fortress knew the king had survived the full moon. Whispers filled the hallways, servants, soldiers, even Mira's enforcers. No one knew the details, but everyone knew something had changed. Sylra stayed in Kael's chambers. He didn't ask her to, she just didn't leave. Pip brought food, bandages, and gossip. "People are saying you're a witch," Pip said, setting down a tray of bread and stew. "That you cast a spell on him." "Do I look like a witch?" "No, but you do look like someone who survived something impossible." Pip sat on the edge of the bed. "How's your hand?" Sylra flexed her fingers. The pain was still sharp, but the bleeding had stopped. "I'll live." "Good," Pip grinned. "Because Mira wants to start training you again tomorrow. She says if you're going to keep doing stupid things, you should at least know how to fight properly." Sylra almost laughed. "Tell her I'll be there." Pip's grin faded. "Sylra, be careful, okay? The king's enemies are going to notice, and when they do, they'll come for you." "Why would they come for me?" "Because you're the only person in the world who can hurt him." Pip's voice dropped. "And that makes you either the most valuable person here or the most dangerous." Pip was right. The first attempt came 5 days later. Sylra was in the courtyard, sparring with Mira, when the arrow flew. It came from the rooftop, silent, fast, aimed straight at Sylra's chest. Mira saw it first. She shoved Sylra sideways, hard. The arrow missed by inches, embedding itself in the dirt where Sylra had been standing. "Down!" Mira shouted. Sylra hit the ground as 2 more arrows whistled past. Mira was already moving, drawing her sword, eyes scanning the rooftops. "East Tower!" someone yelled. Soldiers poured into the courtyard. Mira barked orders, and half of them sprinted toward the tower. The other half formed a perimeter around Sylra. "Stay down," one of them said. Sylra stayed. The archer was caught 10 minutes later, a man in his 30s, scarred and lean, with cold eyes that didn't flinch even when they dragged him into the courtyard and threw him at Kael's feet. Kael stood on the steps, arms crossed, face carved from stone. "Who sent you?" he asked. The man spat blood. "No one." "Liar." "Kill me, I don't care." Kael crouched down, eye level with the man. "You're not from here. Your accent is southern, probably from the Redwood territories." He tilted his head. "Did Lord Varen send you?" The man's jaw tightened. "Thought so." Kael stood. "Take him to the cells. I want names. All of them." The soldiers hauled the man away. Kael turned to Sylra. "Are you hurt?" "No." "Good." He looked at Mira. "Double the guard. No one gets in or out without clearance. And find out how he got past the sentries." Mira nodded and left. Kael held out a hand to Sylra. She took it, letting him pull her to her feet. "They're going to keep coming," he said quietly. "I know. You could leave. I'd let you go. Give you supplies, an escort." "No." Kael's eyes narrowed. "Why not?" Sylra looked at him, really looked at him. The man who'd laughed when she wasn't afraid. The man who trusted her with his worst secret. The man who was still standing even though the world wanted him dead. "Because I'm not done yet," she said. The interrogation took 2 days. Sylra wasn't allowed to watch, but she heard the screams. When Kael finally emerged from the lower levels, his hands were clean, but his eyes were hard. "Varine sent him," he said, "along with 6 others. We caught 3. The other 3 are still out there." They were in the library. Sylra had taken to spending her evenings there, reading the books Kael had shown her, trying to understand what she was. "Who's Varen?" she asked. "A rival, lord of the southern territories. He's been trying to take the north for years." Kael poured himself a drink, downed it in one go. "He thinks if he kills me, the fortress will fall." "Will it?" "Probably." Kael set the glass down. "But if he thinks killing me will be easy, he's wrong. And if he thinks you're a weakness, he can exploit." His voice went cold. "He's about to learn otherwise." Sylra closed the book she'd been reading. "What are you going to do?" "Send a message." The message was delivered 3 days later. The captured assassins, minus the one who'd talked, were sent back to Varen's territory in pieces. Not random pieces. Carefully chosen ones. A hand here, a foot there. Enough to identify them. Enough to send a point. Sylra heard about it from Pip, who looked pale and shaken. "That's brutal," Sylra said. "That's Kael," Pip replied. "He doesn't do warnings, he does examples." Sylra didn't know what to say to that. She found Kael in the throne room that night, staring at a map spread across a table. Markers dotted the surface. Territories, alliances, enemy positions. "You think it'll work?" she asked. "No." Kael didn't look up. "Varen's not the type to back down. If anything, this will make him angrier." He moved one of the markers. "But it buys us time." "Time for what?" "To prepare." He finally looked at her. "Varen won't send assassins next time. He'll send an army. And when he does, we'll need to be ready." Sylra's stomach twisted. "How big of an army?" "Big enough to level this fortress if we're not careful." Kael leaned against the table. "You should leave before that happens." "We've been over this." "I'm serious, Sylra. This isn't your fight." "Yes, it is." She crossed the room, stood across from him. "You think I don't know what happens if you fall? The entire North collapses. The packs tear each other apart. People like me, people who don't fit into their perfect hierarchy, will be the first ones they kill." She met his gaze. "So yeah, this is my fight." Kael stared at her. Then slowly, he smiled. It wasn't a kind smile. It was sharp and dangerous and real. "You're either very brave," he said, "or completely insane." "Can't I be both?" He laughed. Actually laughed. It was a rough, rusty sound, like he'd forgotten how. You're impossible, he said. So are you, Aw said. The next full moon came. Sylra didn't sleep the night before. Neither did Kael. They waited in his chambers, the door locked, the windows barred. Mira stood guard outside. Pip had wanted to stay, but Kael had sent her away. If it doesn't work, Kael said, Mira will kill me. She'll try, Sylra said. She'll succeed. Kael was sitting on the edge of the bed, hands clasped between his knees. She's the only one strong enough. It's going to work. You don't know that. I do. He looked at her. How? Because it has to. The moon rose. Sylra watched Kael's face, waiting for the change, the glow in his eyes, the shift in his bones. Nothing happened. An hour passed. Then 2. Kael stood, paced to the window, stared out at the wasteland. His hands were shaking. It's working, he said quietly. Sylra let out a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. Kael turned, and the look on his face was something she'd never seen before. Relief. Pure, unfiltered relief. You did it, he said. You actually did it. Sylra stood, crossed to him. We did it. He reached out, hesitated, then took her hand. The wounded one. His fingers were warm against her scarred palm. Thank you, he said. It was the first time she'd heard him say it. The celebration didn't last long. 2 days later, the scouts came back with news. Varen's army was on the move. 3,000 soldiers, siege weapons, mages. They'd be at the fortress gates in a week. Kael called a war council, his captains, his strategists, Mira. Sylra wasn't invited, but she stood outside the door and listened anyway. We're outnumbered 5-1, one of the captains said. We've been outnumbered before, Kael replied. Not like this. Varen's brought mages, firecasters. They'll burn the walls down before we even get a chance to fight. Then we don't let them get to the walls. How? Kael was silent for a moment. Then he said, We meet them in the field. The room erupted, voices overlapping, arguing, shouting. Mira's voice cut through the noise. That's suicide. It's strategy, Kael said. If we stay behind the walls, we die slow. If we meet them head on, we at least control the terms. You'll lose half your men before the first charge. I know. More arguing, more shouting. Sylra pushed the door open and walked in. Every head turned. What are you doing here? One of the captains demanded. Sylra ignored him, looked straight at Kael. There's another option. Kael raised an eyebrow. I'm listening. You don't fight them, Sylra said. You poison them. The room went silent. Explain, Kael said. Sylra stepped forward, hands steady despite the stares. Varen's soldiers are all alphas, right? That's how these armies work. Alphas at the front, betas in support. Yes. Then my blood will kill them. She held up her scarred hand. Not all of them, but enough. If we can get it into their water supply, their food, anything they consume, it'll spread through the ranks like a plague. One of the captains laughed. That's insane. It's brilliant, Mira said. Kael was staring at Sylra, his expression unreadable. You'd have to bleed. A lot. I know. It could kill you. Better me than everyone here. No. Kael's voice was sharp. Absolutely not. You don't get to decide that. Yes, I do. You're, He stopped himself. I'm what? Sylra challenged. Your responsibility? Your asset? Your problem? You're not expendable. The words hung in the air. Sylra stepped closer. Neither are they. She gestured to the captains, the soldiers, the people of the fortress. You're asking them to die for you. Let me do the same. Kael's jaw was tight. He looked like he wanted to argue, to refuse, to lock her in a room until this was over. But he didn't. How much blood would you need to give? He asked finally. Sylra swallowed. I don't know. Enough to contaminate their supply lines. Maybe a few pints. That'll kill you. Not if we're careful, Mira spoke up. She's right. If we stagger the extraction, keep her stable, we could do it. It's risky, but it's better than a frontal assault. The other captains were nodding now, murmuring agreement. Kael looked at Sylra. And if it doesn't work? Then we fight. Sylra's voice was steady. But at least we tried something they'd never expect. They started the next morning. The fortress healer, a grizzled man named Oscar, who'd seen too many wars, set up in one of the lower chambers. Sylra lay on a cot, her arm extended, a thin blade poised over her vein. Kale stood in the corner, arms crossed, watching. "This is a bad idea," he said for the 10th time. "Noted," Oscar muttered. He made the cut. Silver blood welled up, dripping into a glass vial. Sylra hissed through her teeth, but didn't pull away. Oscar filled 3 vials before wrapping her arm. "That's enough for today." "We need more," Sylra said. "Not today. You'll pass out." "I'm fine." "You're pale as death and shaking. You're done." Sylra wanted to argue, but the room was spinning. She lay back on the cot and closed her eyes. When she opened them again, Kyle was sitting beside her. "You're an idiot," he said. "Thanks. I mean it. This plan is reckless, dangerous, and has about a dozen ways it could go wrong. And yet you're letting me do it." Kale was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Because you're right. It's the only chance we have." Sylra turned her head to look at him. "Are you scared?" "Terrified." "Of dying?" "Of losing." He met her gaze. "I've lost before. I know what it looks like, and I'm not doing it again." They extracted blood every day for 6 days. By the 4th day, Sylra could barely stand. By the 5th, she couldn't keep food down. By the 6th, Oscar refused to take any more. "She's done," he told Kyle. "One more vial and she's dead." Kale looked at the rows of glass containers lined up on the table. 24 vials, each one filled with liquid silver. "Is it enough?" he asked Mira. "It'll have to be," Mira said. The plan was simple. A small team would infiltrate Varen's camp the night before the assault, poison the water barrels, the food stores, anything they could reach. By the time Varen's army marched, half of them would be dead or dying. Mira handpicked the team herself, 5 of her best. Fast, quiet, ruthless. Sylra wasn't allowed to go. She was too weak, too valuable. She hated it. The team left at midnight. Sylra sat in Kyle's chambers, staring at the door, waiting for news. Kyle sat beside her, silent. Hours passed. Dawn came. The door burst open. Mira stumbled in, covered in blood, her face grim. "It's done," she said, but we lost 2. Kyle stood. "Did it work?" "We'll know soon." Mira looked at Sylra. "Your blood worked. We saw 3 men go down just from touching a contaminated cup. It spreads fast." Sylra's heart was pounding. "And the rest?" "In the water, the food, everything." Mira's smile was sharp. "Varen's going to wake up to a graveyard." Varen's army arrived at noon, but only half of them were still standing. Scouts reported chaos in their ranks, soldiers collapsing, convulsing, black veins crawling up their arms. Officers shouting orders, no one followed, mages too weak to cast. Kyle stood on the fortress walls, watching through a spyglass. "It worked," he said. Sylra stood beside him, leaning heavily on the wall. She was exhausted, hollow, barely able to stand, but she was there. "What now?" she asked. Kale lowered the spyglass. "Now we finish it." He turned to his captains. "Open the gates. Full assault. No mercy." The horn sounded, the gates opened, and Kyle's army poured out like a flood. The battle was brutal. Sylra watched from the walls, her hands gripping the stone, her vision blurring. She saw Kyle on the field, sword in hand, cutting through Varen's weakened soldiers like they were nothing. Saw Mira beside him, a whirlwind of steel and fury. She saw the enemy break, scatter, run, and she saw Varen himself, tall, armored, furious, standing in the center of the chaos, screaming orders that no one obeyed. Kyle reached him. The fight was short. Kale's sword went through Varen's chest. Clean, final. Varen fell. The battle was over. Sylra collapsed before the soldiers even made it back through the gates. She woke in Kyle's chambers, Oscar leaning over her, Pip holding her hand. "You're alive," Pip said, her voice thick with tears. "Barely," Sylra croaked. Oscar grunted. "You've lost too much blood." You need to rest. Weeks of it. Did we win? Yes. Sylra closed her eyes. Good. When she opened them again, Kael was there. He looked different, tired, blood-stained, but free. You saved us, he said. Sylra's laugh was weak. We saved each other. Kael sat on the edge of the bed. The fortress is secure. Varen's territories will fall in line or be wiped out. The north is ours. Congratulations. I couldn't have done it without you. Sylra looked at him. What happens now? Kael was quiet for a long time. Then he said, Now we figure out what comes next. But before either of them could say another word, the door slammed open. A soldier stood there, pale and shaking. My lord, he gasped. There's a rider. From the Council of Lords, they're calling for a tribunal. Kael's face went cold. A tribunal for what? The soldier swallowed. For her. He pointed at Sylra. They're charging her with crimes against the Pax. They say her blood is an abomination. They're demanding her execution. Sylra's heart stopped. Kael stood slowly, his voice like ice. Let them come. The soldier was still standing in the doorway, waiting for orders, his face white as chalk. Kael didn't move, just stared at him with eyes like winter. When? Kael asked. 3 days, my lord. They're gathering at the crossroads. 7 lords, maybe more. Who called it? The soldier hesitated. Lord Heron of the Western Territories. He has support. Of course he does. Kael's voice was flat. Dismissed. The soldier fled. Sylra tried to sit up, but her body wasn't cooperating. Everything felt heavy, like her bones had been replaced with lead. Don't, Oscar said, pushing her back down. You move, you bleed, you die. Stay put. I can't just, you can, and you will. Oscar's tone left no room for argument. He stood, gathering his supplies. I'll be back in an hour. If you're not still in that bed, I'll sedate you myself. He left. Pip was still holding Sylra's hand, her grip tight enough to hurt. They can't do this, Pip whispered. They can't just... They can, Kael said. He was still standing, still staring at the door. The council has the authority. If they declare her a threat to the Pax, they can execute her. It's old law, older than me. Then we fight them, Pip said. We just fought an army, Kael replied. We don't have the strength for another war, not yet. Sylra's throat was tight. So what do we do? Kael finally looked at her. We go to the tribunal. We make them listen. And if they don't? His jaw tightened. Then we make them regret it. The crossroads was neutral ground, a sprawling stone amphitheater built centuries ago, back when the Pack still tried to settle disputes without bloodshed. It sat at the intersection of 5 territories, surrounded by nothing but open plains and old ghosts. The journey took 2 days. Sylra rode in a covered wagon, lying on a pile of furs, too weak to sit upright. Oscar had protested the entire plan, but Kael had overruled him. If Sylra wasn't there, the council would condemn her in absentia. She had to face them. Pip rode beside her, chattering nervously about nothing. Mira rode ahead with Kael and a small escort of soldiers, 20 men, all armed, all tense. This is insane, Pip muttered, for the 100th time. You can barely stand. How are you supposed to defend yourself? I don't need to stand, Sylra said. I just need to talk. Against 7 lords who already want you dead? 8, probably. Heron always brings his lapdog. Pip didn't laugh. Sylra closed her eyes, trying to conserve what little strength she had. Her hand still ached. The wound had scabbed over, but the skin around it was mottled and strange, like tarnished silver. Oscar said it might never heal properly. She didn't care. She was alive. That was more than most people could say. When they reached the crossroads, the sun was setting. The amphitheater loomed ahead, its stone columns casting long shadows across the ground. Banners hung from the upper tiers, territorial markers, each one representing a different lord. Kael's banner wasn't among them. They didn't give us a seat, Mira said quietly. Kael's expression didn't change. We weren't invited. We're here because we choose to be. They dismounted. Sylra tried to climb out of the wagon on her own, but her legs gave out halfway. Kael caught her before she hit the ground. Stubborn, he muttered. Takes one to know one. He didn't let go, just shifted her weight against him and walked her toward the entrance. The amphitheater was full. Not just the lords and their retinues, there were soldiers, servants, scribes, witnesses. Hundreds of people packed into the stone seats, all watching as Kael and Sylra entered. The silence was immediate, absolute. Kael walked her to the center of the arena and set her down on a stone bench. Mira and Pip flanked her. The soldiers formed a loose perimeter. At the far end of the amphitheater, on a raised platform, sat the council. 7 men, all of them old, all of them powerful, all of them looking at Sylra like she was something that had crawled out of a grave. Lord Heron sat in the center. He was thin, sharp-featured, with cold eyes and a smile that didn't reach them. Kael Draven, Heron said, his voice carrying across the stone. You were not summoned. I don't need a summons to defend my own. Heron's smile widened. Your own? So you claim her then? Interesting. Kael didn't rise to the bait. State your charges. Heron stood, spreading his hands like a performer. The charges are clear. Sylra Vance is an abomination. Her blood is poison. She has killed alphas, contaminated an entire army, and poses a threat to every pack in the territories. She saved those packs, Kael said. Varen's army would have burned the north to ash. She stopped them. She killed them, another lord interjected. A fat man with jowls and rings on every finger. Hundreds of them, poisoned like animals. They were soldiers, Mira said. They came to kill. She defended us. By using forbidden methods, Heron said. The old laws are clear. Blood magic is outlawed. Anyone who practices it is to be executed. It's not magic, Sylra said. Her voice was hoarse, but it carried. It's biology. I was born this way. That doesn't make it less dangerous. Heron turned to address the crowd. This girl, this Omega, has demonstrated that she can kill alphas at will. What's to stop her from turning on us? From deciding that the hierarchy itself is her enemy? Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Sylra's hands were shaking. She forced them still. I've never killed anyone who wasn't trying to kill me first, she said. Mikael Vance, Heron said. Age 7. Died when you bled on him. An accident, perhaps. But he's still dead. The murmurs grew louder. Sylra's chest tightened. I was 6 years old. I didn't know what I was. And now you do, which makes you even more dangerous. Heron's gaze was pitiless. You are a weapon that cannot be controlled, and we do not allow weapons to walk free among us. Kael stepped forward. If you want her dead, you'll have to go through me. Heron smiled. Is that a threat, Draven? It's a promise. Then you admit she's yours to protect, which means her crimes are your crimes. Heron gestured to the other lords. The council has the authority to strip you of your title, your lands, your life. All we need is a majority vote. Kael's expression didn't change. You don't have the numbers. Don't I? Heron looked around. Lord Tybalt, Lord Corrin, Lord Vess, Lord Dane. That's 4, including myself. We only need 1 more. The lords he'd named all nodded. Sylra felt her stomach drop. Kael had allies on the council. 2, maybe 3. But if Heron had 4 votes, he only needed 1 more to win. And there were 3 lords who hadn't spoken yet. One of them, a woman with gray hair and a scarred face, stood. Lady Merrin, Heron said smoothly. Your vote? Merrin looked at Sylra, then at Kael, then at Heron. I abstain, she said. Heron's smile faltered. You can't abstain. I just did. This tribunal is a farce, Heron. You're not here for justice. You're here because you're afraid. Of an Omega? Heron laughed. Hardly. You should be. Merrin's voice was sharp. She did what none of us could. She stopped Varen. She saved the North. And you want to kill her for it because it threatens your precious hierarchy. She sat down. I abstain. Let the others decide. The amphitheater erupted. People shouting, arguing, some cheering, some booing. Heron slammed his hand on the platform, calling for order. It took 5 minutes for the noise to die down. Heron's face was red. Fine. Lord Castor, your vote. Castor was an old man, hunched and gray, with eyes that had seen too much. He stood slowly, leaning on a cane. I vote no, he said. The crowd went silent. Heron stared at him. What? I vote no, Castor repeated. The girl saved lives. I will not condemn her for that. She's a threat. She's a solution. Castor's voice was thin but firm. We've been fighting the same wars for 100 years, Heron. The same battles, the same hierarchies. Maybe it's time we tried something different. Heron looked like he wanted to strangle him. You're making a mistake. Probably. Castor sat down. But it's mine to make. That left one lord, a younger man, maybe 40, with dark skin and a calculating gaze. His name was Idris, and he ruled the eastern forests. Everyone looked at him. Idris stood, taking his time. I've heard the arguments, he said, and I've considered the evidence. Heron leaned forward. And? Idris looked at Sylra. Show me your hand. Sylra blinked. What? Your hand. The one that bled. She hesitated, then unwrapped the cloth. The amphitheater collectively inhaled. The wound was worse than it had been. The skin had turned almost entirely silver, the veins beneath it visible and dark. It looked like her hand had been dipped in molten metal and left to cool. Idris walked down from the platform, crossed the arena, and stopped in front of her. Does it hurt? He asked. Yes. Can you use it? She flexed her fingers. They moved, but stiffly. Barely. Idris nodded. You sacrificed this. For strangers. For people who exiled you. I did it to survive. No. Idris's voice was quiet. You did it because it was right. There's a difference. He looked at Heron. I vote no. She lives. The amphitheater exploded. Heron was on his feet, screaming. This is outrageous. She's a danger to all of us. Then so am I, Idris said. Because I refuse to kill someone for being born different. Heron turned to the other lords. You're making a mistake, all of you. This will come back to haunt us. Maybe, Lady Marin said, but we'll deal with it when it does. Heron's face twisted. For a moment, Sylra thought he might attack, might call his soldiers, start a fight right there in the arena. But he didn't. He just stood there, shaking with rage, and then turned and walked out. 2 of the other lords followed him. The rest stayed. The crowd began to disperse, slowly at first, then faster. People filing out of the amphitheater in clusters, whispering and arguing. Sylra sat on the bench, staring at her hand, her mind numb. She'd won. She was alive. Kael crouched in front of her. You okay? She laughed. It came out shaky. I don't know. That's fair. He took her good hand, squeezed it gently. You did well. I didn't do anything. I just sat here. You survived. That's enough. Mira appeared beside them. We should leave. Now. Before Heron decides to ignore the vote. Kael nodded. Agreed. They got Sylra back into the wagon. This time, she didn't protest. As they rode away from the crossroads, Pip leaned over and whispered, You know what this means, right? What? You're not a ghost anymore. People know who you are. They saw you. They heard you. Pip grinned. You're real now. Sylra looked out at the plains, at the fading light, at the world that had tried so hard to erase her. Yeah, she said quietly. I guess I am. They made camp that night in the open. No shelter, no walls, just bedrolls and a fire. Sylra lay on her back, staring at the stars. Her hand throbbed. Her ribs ached. But she was alive. Kael sat beside her, sharpening his sword with long, methodical strokes. You think Heron will come after us? Sylra asked. Probably. And you're okay with that? Kael glanced at her. Are you? She thought about it. Yeah, I think I am. Good. He went back to sharpening. Because this isn't over. Heron's not the type to let things go. He'll regroup, find allies, come at us again. Then we'll deal with it. We? Sylra turned her head to look at him. You think I'm just going to leave after all this? Kael's mouth twitched, almost a smile. I was hoping you wouldn't. Then stop asking. They sat in silence for a while. The fire crackled. The wind whispered through the grass. Can I ask you something? Sylra said. Go ahead. Why didn't you let them kill me? Kael stopped sharpening, set the sword down. Because, he said slowly, you're the first person in a long time who didn't look at me like I was a monster. You were a monster. I know, but you still didn't look at me that way. He met her gaze. You looked at me like I was a problem you could solve. And you did. Sylra's throat was tight. You're not a problem. Aren't I? No. You're just complicated. He laughed, soft, real. So are you. But they reached the fortress 2 days later. The gates opened before they even got close. Soldiers lined the walls, cheering. Servants poured into the courtyard. Word had spread. The tribunal. The vote. Sylra's survival. People were calling her a hero. Sylra hated it. She wasn't a hero. She was just someone who'd refused to die quietly. But she let them cheer anyway. Because they needed it. Because hope was in short supply. And if her survival gave them even a little, she'd take it. Oscar dragged her straight to the infirmary and spent the next 3 days forcing medicine down her throat and changing her bandages. You're an idiot, he said every morning. You've mentioned that, she replied every time. On the 4th day, she was finally allowed out of bed. She walked, slowly, carefully, to the library. Kael was there, surrounded by maps and letters. You should be resting, he said without looking up. I've been resting for 4 days. I'm bored. Boredom won't kill you, exhaustion will. She sat down across from him. What are you working on? Damage control. He gestured to the letters. Half the northern packs are refusing to acknowledge the tribunal's decision. They want me to hand you over. And? And I told them to go to hell. He looked up. Which means we're about to lose some allies. How many? 3. Maybe 4. Sylra's stomach twisted. Because of me. Because of them, Kael corrected. They're cowards. We're better off without them. You don't believe that. I do, actually. He leaned back in his chair. The packs that are standing with us, they're the ones who matter, the ones who see past the old laws, the ones who want something better. He paused. We're building something new here, Sylra, whether we meant to or not. She looked at the maps, at the markers, at the territories. What happens now? She asked. Kael smiled, sharp, dangerous. Now we prove them all wrong. What? The first test came a week later. A messenger arrived from the western borderlands, a small pack, barely 50 people, asking for asylum. They're outcasts, Mira explained. Omegas mostly, some betas, a few disabled alphas. Their lord cast them out after the tribunal, said they were contaminated by sympathy. Kael read the letter, his face unreadable. Where are they now? Camped outside the gates. Let them in. Mira hesitated. My lord, we don't have the resources. Let them in, Kael repeated. Find them shelter, food, work if they can, and make it clear that anyone who harms them answers to me. Mira nodded and left. Sylra watched him. You're collecting strays now? Apparently. He looked at her. Any objections? None. Good. Because there's going to be more. A lot more. He was right. Over the next month, refugees trickled in, then flooded. Outcasts from all over the territories, people who didn't fit, who'd been cast aside, who'd heard that the fortress was taking anyone. The fortress swelled. The barracks overflowed. Tents sprang up in the courtyard. It was chaos. It was also hope. Sylra found herself in the middle of it. Not leading, she wasn't a leader, but helping, organizing, listening. She met a woman named Kira who'd been exiled for refusing an alpha's claim, a boy named Tam who had a twisted leg and couldn't fight, an old man named Orel who'd been a healer before his pack decided healers were a waste of resources. They all had stories, all had scars, and they all looked at Sylra like she was proof that survival was possible. One night, Sylra found Pip sitting on the fortress walls staring out at the wasteland. You okay? Sylra asked, sitting beside her. Pip shrugged. Just thinking. About? About how different everything is now. A few months ago, this place was dying, and now She gestured to the courtyard below, where people were gathered around fires, talking, laughing. Now it's alive. You think it'll last? I don't know. Pip looked at her. Do you? Sylra thought about Heron, about the packs that had refused to stand with them, about the fights that were coming. I think it'll last as long as we fight for it, she said. Pip smiled. Then I guess we'd better keep fighting. The second test came 2 months later. A pack from the Southern Territories sent a delegation, not soldiers, diplomats. They wanted an alliance. Kale met with them in the throne room. Sylra stood beside him, her scarred hand resting on the arm of her chair. The lead diplomat was a woman named Ilara, sharp-eyed and calculating. We've heard about your experiment, Ilara said, taking in outcasts, challenging the old laws. It's bold. It's necessary, Kyle replied. Perhaps. Ilara's gaze shifted to Sylra. And her? The poisonous Omega. She's still here. She is? Why? Because she's useful, because she's loyal, because she's earned her place. Kale's voice was flat. Take your pick. Ilara smiled. And if we asked you to hand her over, as a gesture of good faith? The room went silent. Kale leaned forward. Then you'd leave here empty-handed, or in pieces. Also your pick. Ilara's smile widened. Interesting. You value her that much. I value people who don't waste my time. Are we here to negotiate, or are you just fishing for weaknesses? Ilara laughed. Fair enough. We're here to negotiate. My lord is willing to offer support, trade, soldiers, resources, in exchange for a seat at your table. And what does he want in return? Protection. The old lords are circling, Heron's building alliances. We need to know that if they come for us, you'll stand with us. Kale was quiet for a moment. Then he said, We will, on one condition. Name it. You take in your outcasts, no exile, no execution. Anyone your pack casts aside, you send here first. If we agree they're a danger, we'll deal with it. But you don't get to throw people away just because they don't fit. Ilara's eyes narrowed. That's a steep ask. It's non-negotiable. She looked at Sylra, then back at Kyle. You're serious? Completely. Ilara was quiet. Then she stood and extended her hand. You have a deal. Kyle shook it. As the delegation left, Mira approached. That was risky, she said. So is everything we do, Kyle replied. Sylra stood, her legs still shaky but stronger than they'd been. You really think this will work? Building alliances with packs that might turn on us? Kale looked at her. I think if we don't try, we're already dead. He paused. But yeah, I think it'll work, because we're offering something they can't get anywhere else. What's that? A chance to be something other than what they've always been. That night, Sylra stood on the walls again, looking out at the light scattered across the fortress. Kyle joined her. You've been busy, he said. So have you. They stood in silence for a while. Do you regret it? Kyle asked. Any of it? Sylra looked at her scarred hand, at the silver veins, at the proof of what she'd given. No, she said. Do you? No. She turned to face him. What happens when they come for us again? Because they will. Then we fight. Kale's smile was sharp. And we win. Like we always do. Sylra smiled back. You make it sound easy. It's not. But we've done harder. He was right. They had. And they'd do it again. Because the world wasn't kind, wasn't fair, wasn't built for people like them. But they were still here, still fighting, still alive. And that was enough. Winter came early that year. Snow fell on the fortress for the first time in a decade, covering the black stone in white, turning the wasteland into something almost beautiful. The refugees huddled around fires, wrapped in whatever furs and blankets they could scavenge. The soldiers kept watch from the walls, their breath fogging in the frozen air. Sylra stood in the courtyard, watching the snow fall, her scarred hand tucked into her coat pocket. She'd regained most of her strength over the past months, could walk without stumbling, could train with Mira without collapsing. But the hand never fully healed. The silver veins had spread up her wrist now, crawling toward her elbow like roots. Oscar said it would probably keep spreading, slowly, maybe forever. She'd stopped caring. Pip appeared at her side, carrying 2 steaming mugs. Hot cider. Kira made it. It's terrible, but it's warm. Sylra took one, sipped. Pip was right. It was awful. She drank it anyway. You heard about the supply caravan? Pip asked. Which one? The one from the eastern forests. Idris sent it. Food, medicine, weapons, enough to get us through winter. Sylra smiled. He's keeping his word. So far. Pip blew on her cider. Mira says 3 more packs have asked for alliances. Small ones, but still. Word's spreading. Good. Is it? Pip's voice was quiet. I mean, the more people who know about us, the more enemies we make. We already have enemies. Yeah, but now they're organized. Pip looked at her. Heron's been quiet. Too quiet. That scares me. It should have scared Sylra too, but she was tired of being afraid. Let him come, she said. We'll be ready. She wasn't wrong about Heron. He came 3 weeks later, not with an army, not with soldiers, with a challenge. The messenger arrived at dawn carrying a sealed letter addressed to Kael. Mira brought it to him in the war room where he was meeting with his captains. Sylra was there too. She'd started attending the meetings a month ago, not because Kael asked, but because she had ideas and he listened to them. Kael broke the seal, read the letter, and went very still. What is it? Mira asked. Kael set the letter down. Heron's calling for single combat, him against me. Winner takes the disputed territories. The room erupted. It's a trap, one of the captains said. Obviously, Mira replied, but if you refuse, you look weak, and if you accept, I'll fight him, Kael said. My lord, I said I'll fight him. Kael's voice was flat. This has been coming since the tribunal. We all knew it. Might as well get it over with. Sylra's stomach twisted. When? New moon. Neutral ground. The old stone circle near the crossroads. Kael looked at her. He's allowed seconds. I'll need 3. I'll go, Mira said immediately. And me, another captain added. Kael looked at Sylra. You. She blinked. What? I want you as my 3rd. Can't fight. You don't need to. You just need to be there. His eyes were hard. If something goes wrong, I need someone I trust. That's you. Sylra opened her mouth, closed it, nodded. The journey to the stone circle took 4 days. Kael rode in silence, his face unreadable. Mira kept the soldiers sharp, drilling them every night in case Heron tried something. Sylra stayed close to the wagon, her hand aching in the cold. On the 3rd night, Kael found her sitting by the fire, staring into the flames. Can't sleep? He asked. Not really. He sat beside her. Nervous? Terrified. Good. That means you're paying attention. He picked up a stick, poked at the fire. I'm gonna win. You sound certain. I am. Heron's good, but he's arrogant, and arrogance gets you killed. Sylra looked at him. What if you're wrong? Then you run. Take Pip. Take whoever will follow you and get as far from here as you can. I'm not running. Sylra, I'm not running, she repeated. If you die, I stay. I fight, and I make them regret it. Kael stared at her. Then he laughed, soft, surprised. You really mean that? Every word. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, You've changed. So have you. Yeah. He looked back at the fire. I used to think being a king meant being the strongest, the most feared, but you taught me something. What's that? That strength isn't just about how hard you hit. It's about what you're willing to sacrifice and what you refuse to lose. He met her gaze. I'm not losing you, or this, or any of it. Not to Heron, not to anyone. Sylra's throat was tight. Don't make promises you can't keep. I don't. Eat. The stone circle was ancient, older than the packs, older than the hierarchies, maybe older than memory. 12 massive stones arranged in a perfect ring, each one carved with symbols no one could read anymore. Heron was already there when they arrived. He stood in the center of the circle, flanked by his seconds, 2 massive alphas, both armed, both looking like they'd enjoy tearing someone apart. Heron himself was smaller than Sylra had expected, lean, wiry, with sharp features and eyes like a snake. He smiled when he saw Kael. "Draven, I was beginning to think you'd chickened out." "I don't run from fights," Kael said. "No, you just collect strays and pretend you're building something." Heron's gaze shifted to Sylra. "And you brought the poisonous whore. How touching." Sylra didn't flinch, just stared at him until his smile faltered. "Rules are simple," Heron said, turning back to Kael. "No weapons, no interference. First blood, or death. Your choice." "Death," Kael said. Heron's smile returned. "I was hoping you'd say that." They stripped to the waist. The cold bit at their skin, but neither of them seemed to notice. Mira handed Kael a leather cord to tie his hair back. "Don't play with him. End it fast." "I know." Sylra stepped forward. "Kael." He looked at her. She didn't know what to say. Didn't have words for the tangle of fear and hope and desperation knotted in her chest. So she just said, "Don't die." He smiled. "Wasn't planning on it." The fight started fast. Heron lunged first, low and quick, going for Kael's legs. Kael sidestepped, brought an elbow down on Heron's spine. Heron rolled, came up swinging. They moved like predators, circling, feinting, looking for openings. Heron was faster, but Kael was stronger. Every hit Kael landed sounded like breaking wood. Heron got in a good shot, a knee to Kael's ribs that made him stagger. He followed up with a punch to the jaw that snapped Kael's head back. Sylra's hands clenched. Kael spat blood and grinned. "That the best you've got?" Heron snarled and charged. "Mistake." Kael caught him mid-charge, shifted his weight, and slammed Heron into the ground. The impact was brutal. Heron gasped, tried to roll away, but Kael was already on him. Punch, punch, punch. Heron's face split open. Blood poured from his nose, his mouth. "Yield," Kael said. Heron spat a tooth. "Go to hell." Kael hit him again, and again. Heron stopped moving. Kael stood, breathing hard, blood dripping from his knuckles. One of Heron's seconds started forward. Mira drew her sword. "Don't," she said. The man stopped. Kael looked down at Heron's body. Then he looked at the crowd that had gathered. Lords, soldiers, witnesses. "The challenge is settled," Kael said. His voice carried across the circle. "The disputed territories are mine. Anyone who disagrees can step into the ring." No one moved. "Good." Kael turned and walked back to his side. Mira clapped him on the shoulder. "Clean fight. Well done." Kael just nodded. He looked exhausted. Sylra stepped forward, handed him a cloth. "You're bleeding." "I know." She helped him wipe the blood off his face. His hands were shaking, adrenaline probably, or relief. "It's over," he said quietly. "For now." He looked at her. "You don't think this ends it?" "I think Heron had allies, and they're going to be angry." Kael's jaw tightened. "Let them be angry. I'm done playing defense." The ride back to the fortress was tense. Scouts reported movement in the Western Territories, soldiers gathering, supply lines being established. Heron's allies were regrouping. "They're going to come at us," Mira said. "All of them, together." "How many?" Kael asked. 2,000, maybe more. Sylra's heart sank. "We don't have those numbers." "No, but we have something they don't." "What?" Kael looked at her. "You." Sad. The plan was insane. Kael wanted to use Sylra's blood again. Not as poison this time, as a deterrent. "We spread word that we have a weapon," Kael explained. "Something that can kill entire armies. We don't say what it is. We just let them imagine." "And if they call your bluff?" one of the captains asked. "Then we use it for real." Kael's voice was flat. "But I'm betting they won't. Fear is a weapon too, and right now we need every weapon we can get." Mira shook her head. "This is a gamble." "Everything's a gamble," Sylra stood. "I'll do it, but not like this." Kael frowned. "What do you mean?" "I mean, I'm done hiding what I am, done pretending I'm not dangerous." She looked around the room. "You want to use me as a weapon? Fine, but we do it my way." Her way was a revelation, literally. Sylra stood on the fortress walls in full view of anyone watching and cut her palm open. Silver blood dripped onto the stone, pooling and shimmering in the sunlight. Then she raised her hand, letting the blood run down her arm, and called out in a voice that carried across the wasteland. "I am Sylra Vance, the poisonous Omega, the girl you tried to kill." She paused. "I survived your tribunals, your assassins, your wars, and I will survive whatever you send next, because I am not your victim. I am your reckoning." The words echoed. Scouts from the enemy camps watched, whispered, ran back to their lords. Word spread like wildfire. Within a week, the enemy armies started to fracture. Soldiers deserted. Lords argued. Alliances crumbled. Because fear, it turned out, was a weapon. And Sylra wielded it better than any sword. The final confrontation came on a clear winter morning. What was left of Heron's coalition, maybe 800 soldiers, marched on the fortress. Kyle met them in the field with his own forces, outnumbered but not outmatched. Sylra rode beside him, her scarred hand wrapped in cloth, a vial of her blood hanging from her neck. The enemy stopped 100 yards out. Their leader, a lord named Kragan, red-faced and furious, rode forward. "Draven," he shouted, "surrender the Omega and we'll let you live." Kale didn't move. "No." "Then you'll die with her." "Probably. But you'll die first." Kragan sneered. "You're bluffing. You don't have the numbers." Sylra nudged her horse forward. "He doesn't need numbers." She held up the vial. "This is my blood," she said. "One drop kills an alpha. I have enough here to contaminate your entire water supply, your food, your weapons, everything." She smiled, cold, sharp. "And if you think I won't use it, ask Varen's soldiers." "Oh, wait, you can't. They're all dead." Kragan's face went pale. "So here's the deal," Sylra continued. "You turn around, you go home, you leave us alone, and I don't turn your army into a graveyard." Silence. Kragan looked at his soldiers. They were already backing away, murmuring fear spreading through the ranks. "This is a trick," Kragan said, but his voice shook. "Maybe." Sylra uncorked the vial. "Want to find out?" Kragan stared at her, then at Kyle, then at his own men, who were now openly retreating. "Damn you," he spat. Then he turned his horse and rode away. His army followed. Toa! The fortress erupted in cheers, soldiers shouting, refugees crying, Pip screaming so loud Sylra's ears rang. Kale just sat on his horse, staring at the retreating army, his face unreadable. "You okay?" Sylra asked. "We won," he said. "We did. Without a single death." "Yeah." He looked at her. "You terrify me sometimes." She grinned. "Good." That night, Kyle called a gathering in the Great Hall. Everyone came, soldiers, refugees, servants, even the kids. Kale stood at the front, Sylra beside him. "We've been through hell," he said. "All of us. We've been exiled, hunted, cast aside, told we didn't matter, that we were disposable." He paused. "But we're still here, and we're not going anywhere." Cheers. This fortress isn't just a stronghold anymore, it's a sanctuary, a place where anyone, alpha, beta, omega doesn't matter, can find shelter, can find purpose. He looked at Sylra. "Because we've proven something, that the old ways don't work, that fear and dominance and hierarchy don't make us strong. What makes us strong is standing together, fighting for each other, refusing to let the world break us." The hall roared. Kale raised a hand for silence. "So here's what happens next. We build, we grow, we open our gates to anyone who needs them, and we show the territories that there's another way to live." He turned to Sylra, "And we do it because one girl refused to die quietly." Sylra's face burned. "Kale, you saved us," he said. "All of us. Not just from Varian, not just from Heron. You saved us from ourselves, from the fear that kept us small." He held out his hand. "So I'm asking, will you stand with me? Help me build this? Not as a weapon, not as a tool, as an equal." The hall went silent. Sylra looked at his hand, at the people watching, at Pip, grinning through tears, at Mira, nodding. She took his hand. The hall exploded. Spring came slowly. The snow melted. The wasteland turned green, just a little, just enough to remind people that the world wasn't entirely dead. The fortress grew. New walls went up. New buildings, a school, a clinic, a place where people could learn trades, heal wounds, start over. Refugees kept coming, dozens, then hundreds. Sylra and Kale worked side by side, building something that didn't have a name yet, but felt like home. One morning, Sylra stood on the walls, watching the sunrise, her scarred hand resting on the stone. Kale joined her. "Busy day ahead," he said. "Every day's busy." "True," he leaned against the wall. "You ever think about what comes next?" "I try not to. Planning's never been my strength." "Mine either." He looked at her. "But I think we're doing okay." "Yeah," she smiled. "We are." They stood in silence, watching the light spread across the land. "You know what the best part is?" Kyle said. "What?" "They're scared of us. The old lords, the councils, the ones who wanted us dead." He grinned. "And it's not because we're strong. It's because we're different, because we refuse to play by their rules." "And that's enough?" "For now." He straightened. "But one day, it won't just be us. It'll be everyone like us. Every outcast, every misfit, every person who was told they didn't matter." He looked at her. "And when that day comes, the old world won't stand a chance." Sylra thought about Mikhail, about her pack, about the shack at the edge of the world, about how far she'd come. "No," she said quietly. "It won't." Years passed. The fortress became a city. The city became a haven. Sylra never stopped being dangerous. Her blood never stopped being poison. But people learned to see past it, to see her. She trained fighters, taught healers, helped refugees find their place, and every night she stood on the walls and looked out at the world they'd built. Kale stood beside her, as always. "You tired?" he asked one night. "Always. Want to stop?" "Never," he laughed. "Good, because we're just getting started." Sylra looked at him, at the scars on his hands, at the gray in his hair, at the man who'd been a monster and became something better. "You know what I think?" she said. "What?" "I think we already won. Everything else is just details." Kyle smiled. "Maybe you're right." "I usually am." He laughed again, and the sound echoed across the city, across the wasteland, across the world they'd remade. Because in the harshest worlds, survival isn't about fitting in. It's about rewriting the rules. And Sylra Vance, the girl no one could touch, had done exactly that. She'd survived. She'd fought. She'd won. And she'd proven, once and for all, that the most dangerous thing in the world isn't a curse. It's someone who refuses to be broken.